Alright, to break things down for us about yesterday's game, kausapan natin ang basketball analyst si Adrian Dy. Welcome back to The Score.
Thanks
for joining us. Okay, very exciting finish to the elimination round. Of course, hats off to the performances of other teams who didn't make it. UP made a great run. Of course, FEU was not playing the same role that they wanted. Hindi nakisama. UST getting a win, so good for them as well. Pero syempre, all the attention on the weekend eventually was towards LaSalle and Ateneo. Coming into the game, it's first we know Ateneo was unbeaten 13-0, but LaSalle was unbeaten in the second round. And going into it, looking at how both teams are running into that matchup, what were you seeing as the chances of either team?
Well, I felt kasi we know what happened in round one, where LaSalle basically gave the game away when they threw the ball away on the inbounds, allowing Matt Nieto to hit those 2 free throws. So I'm sure yung isip ng mga LaSalle players was, we gave that one away, bawi tayo. And we saw that. Things were close again throughout the game. It was back and forth. But this time, in the end, they were able to win via a 10-0 run and stain the record of Ateneo.
Let's try to break it down bit by bit and some of the certain characters who did very well and maybe some who didn't. Obviously, Ben Mbala was huge for LaSalle, 28 points. If I recall correctly, he's more dominant this time than he was in the first round encounter.
Definitely.
But he did a lot more things than we saw him doing in the past. He was even guarding a lot of 30 Ravenna, which I don't think we saw a lot of in round one.
We saw that in round two with other teams when he was guarding Paul Desiderio, for example, Jeric Ahanmisi, nung naglaban sila against Adamson. So that's the adjustment I think that we're seeing now that LaSalle is making. Na we know Ben Mbala is so athletic, wing player nga siya sa international competitions.
And pinag-wing siya.
Exactly. He has the athleticism to guard those wing players and bother them with his length. And so that was a great adjustment in my opinion.
And some saw the key to that was that going big. I mean, kasabay ni Ben at the 3 was Stratter at the 4 and then Justin Baltazar at the 5. That was massive. I mean, when you first saw that, I mean, some people would think that's going to be slow. How can you run your mayhem defense with a slow lineup like that? But would you say that was more tailor-fit for their half-court defense rather than a full-court defense?
And you have to remember the situation. Ateneo had foul trouble throughout the game, especially two centers, Chibueze Ike. And so they had to go a lot of times with Isaac Go at center. They had a period nga when they had to go really small with Chris Porter at center. And so when you have just one big guy in Ateneo, the rest are basically wing players, essentially, and LaSalle is throwing up 3 big guys, that's a huge advantage for LaSalle, especially in terms of offensive rebounds. Nakita nga natin, Ateneo is usually able to force the initial miss, but they couldn't get the rebound, resulting in lots of second chance points for the Green Archers. And so that was key, I think, in that game.
Right. Well, 30 Ravenna and Richie Rivera, that interesting matchup at the 2-guard spot. 30 had 15 points, but he was only 5 of 12 from the field. He did have 4 turnovers. Of course, there were times that Mbala was all over him like a leech as well. Talk about that matchup and you know how key that is. Of course, for LaSalle, you'd have Mbala doing what he does, giving you the numbers, the rebounds, the blocks, the intimidation. But how crucial was it for Richie to step up like that?
It's definitely crucial because Ateneo will be forced to double Mbala oftentimes. And so that leaves one less defender around. And LaSalle is smart enough to recognize when that happens and get the ball to Richie, who's probably one of their most athletic local players. And so, you know, in the first game, he missed, I think, only 2 shots out of like 12 attempts. And in this game, he wasn't that far off. And so it's really hard for Ateneo to double team Mbala, and then you have this guy like wreaking havoc in your interior defense. On the other hand, Ateneo likes to have 30 create, but then, as you said, when you've got this big blanket of the 2-time MVP smothering you, it's really hard for their offense to start clicking. And we know how important precision is to that Tab Baldwin offense.
Exactly. Well, and speaking of the Tab Baldwin offense, we know that really relies a lot heavily on the consistency of their guards. Matt Nieto, Adnon Asistio. Numbers-wise, they were there, 12 for Matt, and then Anton had 6, but it didn't seem that they had as much control and as dominance in the offense as they usually have. And what would you attribute this to? I mean, was LaSalle better prepared for the way these two guys run that, you know, that quick motion offense and everything that Tab wants to run?
Yeah, I actually tweeted nung 4th quarter when LaSalle was making that run, parang basang-basa ng LaSalle kung what Ateneo wanted to run. And I think that they adjusted with that full court press that changed the dynamic to put more pressure on the guards, bring up the ball, and get the ball out of Matt Nieto's hands. We know how spectacular he is. He's shooting better than 50% from 3-point territory. And so when you get the ball out of his hands, you put it in less sure shooters like Asistio. That's a huge advantage already, given how much Ateneo relies on the 3-point shot.
I may be wrong, but I saw a 1-2-1-1 in the 4th quarter that he didn't use if ever he did in the previous 3 quarters much. He didn't use it much. Or even in the past, because what was interesting was he was trapping with not the 2 at the top, 1-2-1-1, the second line of defense, which was basically Trotter. He would come in and trap. It was a big corner trap, and that basically parang wala ka ng weaving. It's a high half-court zoning trap na parang if you get away with this, fine, but you won't have your weaving offense that you like.
And napansin ko rin kasi in the first half, especially in the first half, what Ateneo would do is, even if it's a miss or a make, they would just immediately throw the ball up court. And usually Isaac goes able to camper out and basically cherry pick baskets. And so by switching around to have Mbala run back as fast as he could, and then having Trotter be the rover essentially, that really took away that plan of Ateneo. And so in the fourth quarter, their offense kind of sputtered to a halt. They weren't able to do that. They were forced to go into the half court. And yun nga, when you have Trotter being the guy trapping these people, it's really hard for them given their size disadvantage nga.
For those who are watching, does this make people understand now how actually evenly matched these two teams are and how close it is? I mean, you'd see the Ateneans, syempre they're so excited, so happy. 13-0, kaya natin sweep to. They felt that dominance. And then LaSalle, they knew, as you said, they just lost in that one game that they gave the ball up. Of course, they had another loss. Ibang kwento yun. But in terms of how good these two teams are, was yesterday's game an indication of potentially how good of a finals we could have?
I think going kasi into the season, a lot of people thought that LaSalle would be in one tier, and then Ateneo, and then the rest of the teams. And basically, we saw that nag-switch lang yung Ateneo and LaSalle. Na Ateneo's in the first tier because they were undefeated for a long time. And so, I think people kind of forgot that LaSalle is the defending champions, diba? And so they know what it takes to get there, and they're hell-bent on defending that title, essentially. And so, when you came into this game and you're like, okay, Ateneo, their arch rivals, are trying to go automatically to the finals, for sure LaSalle's not going to give them an easy path to that. So, they definitely threw haymakers at them.
Exactly. And don't forget the hiccup that LaSalle had at the start of the season. They didn't have Benebali for 2 games. And not just that, they didn't have him for practices.
Exactly.
For
leading up
2 weeks.
to the season.
Exactly. So, the chemistry issue was obviously there. Okay, looking into the Final Four, now both these teams have to go through the Final Four. As much as Ateneo wanted the sweep, they're going to have to go through it this time, and they're going to have to face FEU. Let's look at that first, and how hungry and how dangerous a team like FEU is in terms of, hey, there's not much pressure on us. No one's probably going to pick us to win and beat this Ateneo. What are the chances of Coach Olsen and his boys there?
And there's that additional factor na Arvin Tolentino and Hubert Cani, former Ateneo Blue Eagles, probably want to at least get 1 win against their former side. No? The thing, though, is that Ateneo, if you look at the way LaSalle was able to beat them by going tall, FEU doesn't exactly have that many options besides Prince Arizo to go tall. And so they're basically forced into a ball movement contest. Who can move the ball more to generate open shots? And when you look at those two teams, Ateneo is really good at that. And FEU sort of, as we mentioned last time I was here, they're still trying to figure out the right combination of guards to make that sort of thing happen. We've seen Jasper Parker now, but in that last game against Adamson, nandun si Wendell Comboy, he had a good game. And so if they can unlock that right combination against Ateneo early on, then I think they'd have a really good chance. Pero Ateneo is coming off a loss. I'm sure they want to prove to their critics that that was just a blip on the radar. And so I find it kind of tough that FEU will have the chance to sort of upset. It'll be a close game, I think, because if you look at the elimination round games, medyo dikit naman yung score for the most part. But I think Ateneo probably be the one to advance in this game.
Adamson and LaSalle, unfortunately for Adamson, they're coming off a loss. So they would have wanted to come off a win with all the momentum and confidence boost. Worse, they have 2 of their key guys. Might not be 100%. I heard from Steph Monse, the reporter, that they're both walking today. Anmis is now running a bit as well. So it'll take a while. They're hoping that this 5 days of rest is good for them. Buti na lang for them that they're not playing in a stepladder
game
that plays right away on Wednesday. So what are the chances of Adamson? I know they're very hungry. You have these former LaSalle players and coach before who would love to beat LaSalle. You know that with Coach Franz. But they've got the pieces, but are they healthy enough and are they prime enough to step up and be mature, more mature than last year? As last year, people even they said maybe it was too early for them to make it to the Final Four.
Well, una-una, Papi Sara has to play a really huge game. if we talked about Embala na he missed the first 2 games, Sar missed the first game and
That's
he was
right.
also injured, and it took some time to sort of round into form. So if he is now 100% and he's picked up on what his teammates' quirks are, if we can see a sort of clash of the titans between those 2 centers, then I think Adams has a chance. Of course, as we said, Misi and Pingoy are not 100%. They may not be 100% by this weekend. And that's a problem because if LaSalle goes full-on mayhem defense on them, just bringing up the ball will be a problem.
Yes,
so Robbie Manalang, guys like that, have to be the one to sort of take charge, maybe use Misi more as a decoy, possibly.
I mean, he could just stand in the corner, hey, shoot, you know?
Exactly.
And he's still to pull the defense out.
Definitely.
He'll still be a guy who can help set for, but it should be a lot of fun. Abangan niyo po yan. That's starting this Saturday for the UAAP Final Four. AIDS, maraming salamat. We'll see you again soon.
No problem,
All right.
Tige.
Sa pagbabalik natin, DLSU Green Archer big man Ben Embala, back-to-back MVP ng UAAP men's basketball. The Score will be right back.
For more sports updates, keep watching The Score. And don't forget to subscribe.